Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session on low-code integrations for Razor's Edge NXT with Power Platform. We'll begin in a couple minutes here. My name is Dan Whitaker, and I've been with Blackbaud 9 years, working in the tuition management practice as a program manager. And just a few housekeeping items before we begin. The audio for the webinar is broadcast through your computer speakers. So if you experience any audio or technical issues, oftentimes that's remedied by just refreshing your browser. The session will be recorded and is going to be available 24 hours after the presentation. And you can download the slides of the presentation in the Docs tab in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Please use the Q&A tab to submit any questions you may have for Jess. And then the chat tab is for group conversations, and then messages can be used. The message tab can be used to direct message participants. If you've missed a session either today or over the last couple of days here of BB Dev Days, all sessions are recorded and are going to be available in the agenda builder under the on-demand tab 24 hours after our closing announcements later this afternoon. At the end of the presentation, there's a brief 4-question survey that we'll ask you to complete, as we really appreciate your feedback. So with that, I want to introduce Jessica White, who is the Director of CRM and Database Administration at Opportunity International. So, Jess?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Low Code Integrations for Razor's Edge NXT with Power Platform. A little bit more about me. I have about 13 years of experience using Razor's Edge, a little bit newer to using integrations, low code. I've been doing that for about 2 years, and I'm going to talk about a few different options for low code. I call them soft integrations, but I started out with the most manual one that we'll go through and kind of have progressed as I've learned more. Especially, I do a little bit of consulting on the side for automations and Power BI reporting. And one of my clients was interested in exploring cost-effective, as in real-time as possible integrations. And I got a little bit deeper and got more familiar with webhooks combined with Power Automate. So we'll talk about that as well. I would not consider myself an expert. I am not a coder. I have no background in that. So all of this has been through the resources available in the community and just me learning as I go. So let's go ahead and jump in. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about the few different options of moving data to Razor's Edge from external systems. And then all of them go to a Power Automate flow. The flows vary based on which method we're using, and also the configuration of webhooks. If you have a webhook you're able to access. So I've used webhooks, custom connectors, and exports, all ending in a Power Automate flow that moves information to Razor's Edge. So first we'll talk about webhooks, which I found is the most complex but also the most automated scenario. So they very much vary depending on the system. So that's why I don't use webhooks for everything. Some of them that I have attempted require really complex authentication that I think I'd have to probably be more of a software developer to understand. So I do what works for me with my current skill set. So for webhooks that don't require a super complex authentication or validation, especially hashing the return response, I ran into that with Zoom, we can use a when an HTTP request flow, when an HTTP request is received flow to handle this. So I have a screenshot here of the trigger for my flow and the actual flow for one of the webhook scenarios. So some platforms have a configure webhook section, and you can choose which triggers you want to set up webhooks for, and they have a put in your URL to where you want to send the information for when this event happens. So if you create a Power Automate flow that begins with the trigger of when an HTTP request is received, it actually, when you save it, will generate a unique HTTP URL for you. So then you can copy that URL and paste it into the configuration. So in the example I have here, you can see on the right, when a new person is added to this external platform that's in this example, it writes that information out into a compose action for me. That really is for me in my learning. So each different output of a webhook is a different kind of JSON format. And I start out by just building that as a step and triggering the webhook so I can see what the output is going, what format the output's going to be like. And I need to do that so that I will then be able to configure the schema for parse JSON. And the reason I need to do that is it takes the array that comes through the webhook and parses it out into objects that I can call later into the flow, like first name, last name, and email. In the example you see here, you see this get accounts action. For most of you, this would be, you could use the built-in search for a constituent in RE. This example here is for one of my consulting clients who uses Neon CRM, and I built a custom connector for them. So that's what that is, but that would be a Razor's Edge. You would use a Razor's Edge plugin for that. So what it does then is if there are accounts that match, it goes down the path of it doesn't need to do anything. This person already exists in Razor's Edge. And if not, it creates their account in Razor's Edge, and I have it configured to configure it with the source of which platform it came from. So this would apply to Razor's Edge as well. Instead of create account, it would be create an individual constituent, and we are able to use all of the great built-in the great built-in connectors that Blackbaud has provided us with. So something about webhooks is depending on the setup of the webhook from the platform you're using, it doesn't always provide all of the information that you're going to need in your flow. So in the example that I've provided here, when I did the compose action to see, okay, what am I working with that comes through this, it only provided the URL to the item that triggered the webhook. So then we need to do an extra step in our flow to get all of the information we need to search Razor's Edge and later maybe add them if they don't exist. So the extra step that we have here is an HTTP action. So we actually use the output from the webhook, we use it to provide the URL in the trigger there. So then we just continue on the process that we did in the previous example where we parse the JSON to allow us to call the objects later in the flow to search by first name, last name, and email. So one other thing I've run into with the webhook triggers and sending it to the URL is that the webhook provides no information at all other than a webhook ID. So there are still ways to access the information for the webhook through the API. So in this example, we're actually able to use an HTTP action that goes right after the trigger to call the most recent order via the URL. In this example, I believe this WordPress. So this would be the the event that triggered the webhook. So then we can continue on the flow as we did in the previous examples, parsing that JSON and checking if they exist in RE and adding them if they do not. The next option is custom connectors. So if you haven't worked with custom connectors at all, and if you're new to them, Glenn Hudson did a excellent session yesterday, Custom Connectors 101, that I'd encourage you to go watch. I wish I would have had that session available to me when I started working with custom connectors. I just did a lot of my own research and a lot of trial and error. But I have worked with custom connectors and was able to make them work. Specifically for our integration with Cvent. So Cvent's webhooks option is quite expensive and wasn't within our budget, but we also didn't want to have it be a very manual process. So I ended up building a custom connector that uses Cvent's Open API documentation that gets the events on a regular schedule and gets the participants. And then I built flows that run through these connectors daily and move any new events from Cvent to Razor's Edge or updates them if they have changed. And the same thing with the participants. So this works well for us because these are for small trips that we have for our organization with limited registration. So it's okay for us that it's not happening in real time, but we do have it happen on a daily basis. We did recently purchase webhooks because we're considering using Cvent for some of our larger gala type events, and hopefully I get those configured and can talk about that in a future presentation. So I'm going to give a brief intro to custom connectors, but like I said, Glenn Hudson does a really good job of going deeper into this process if you're brand new to it. So you're able to set all this up really with the API documentation that's available through these third-party platforms. They make it really easy by providing examples of the schemas for you so that you can just copy and paste the URLs for each endpoint. So you can set up the URL of the Open API when you're first setting it up, configure authentication. In the case you see here, I built an app on the Cvent side to obtain access with OAuth 2 using a client ID and secret. But sometimes you can do something more simple with a basic authentication with a username and password or an API key. So the next thing you do when you're configuring a custom connector is configuring the endpoint connection. So in this example here, I'm building a connection to the attendees endpoint. When I've set this up in the past, I have run into small errors that pop up that say the swagger's incorrect. Again, I'm not a coder, I don't know how to fix that, but I've actually been able to use AI and ChatGPT to help me fix those small errors that occur sometimes when it automatically creates the swagger based off of the URL. So the most manual option, but that we can still semi-automate with Power Automate, is exports. So the best example I have for that is Zoom. I tried to configure webhooks for Zoom, and the validation and authentication was beyond my skill level or programming tools that I have access to. So I haven't had time yet to investigate if custom connector is an option. I'm a one-person department, so I'm always just moving as quickly as I can and using the tools I have available at the time. But we had some upcoming virtual events that were happening, and our fundraisers need to be able to see in Razor's Edge. That's their source of truth. That's where they need to see who's attending these events, who hasn't registered yet. And we originally were doing that once a week with exporting the data from Zoom and then having me query in Razor's Edge, see if they're already there. If not, import them. And it was very manual and took too much time. So our solution was to export the registrants from Zoom daily and use a Power Automate flow to check against Razor's Edge and update the registration. The one downside is the manual step of exporting the data from Zoom, but it's still so much more efficient and cost effective for us to be able to get this information into Razor's Edge quickly. So here I just have a screenshot of the format that the Zoom registration report comes through. So once you have that format and you know that you're going to be able to export it in that same format every time, you can build your Power Automate flow around that format. So you can build the flow once, and then every time you need to update it, you just click run. I keep overwriting the original file name, so I don't even have to update the file in the automation. I literally just go to Power Automate and click go. So this is just a quick shot of my flow for exports. So the flow loops through each row to check if they are in Razor's Edge. It does a check against their first name, last name, email. It checks who's already in the event. And then I have a condition to check, does that system record ID already exist in the event? If it does, we want to update their participation to registered, because we do import all of our invitees in as invited prior. So there is a good chance they will be in there already and just need their registration updated. If they're a constituent and they are not already in this event as a participant, it creates the participation and adds them as registered. On the false side, you'll see if there's no match in Razor's Edge for this person, it creates them as an individual constituent. Creates a constituent code and adds that participation. So this has been great for our fundraisers to be able to know in real time who to follow up with to drive attendance for our events. We also use a similar flow to update registration and attendance at events in real time for people coming at the door. So there's a lot of different use cases for a flow like this as well. And I know I talked really fast and went through a lot of things, but I really like to make sure to save enough time for questions, especially if this is new to everyone. So I have my email here if you want to reach out, but I also am happy to answer any Q&A at this time. So let me pop over to the Q&A here. I'm going to start at the bottom. Did the events data flow include all layers of event data? If not, what event data were you updating and integrating? So it does include everything from the event API endpoint in cVent. I don't move all of that information over, but the big things we need are the name, the event date, and that is what changes sometimes. So this is for our Insight Trip events. It's where we send our donors to go see our work. And a lot of the times we won't get enough registrations and we'll end up postponing them or things like that. So originally my flow was just moving the events into the system because I was like, that's good enough. But our Insight Trip manager was noting to me, hey, we ended up changing this date, or we changed the name of this event. Now I can't find it. So I updated my flow to update those things as they changed. Does Blackbaud support custom webhooks for RE NXT? I believe I saw in the messages that Austin answered that. I don't use any of the webhooks for RE NXT at this time. I use automations for the things that I need to get out of Razor's Edge for different events that happen. But I believe Austin answered that. cVent is still not working with RE NXT, right? Correct. So that is why I built that custom connector, and why I am looking into webhooks. I know Cvent did tell us that they could build a custom integration for us, but it was for a very, very expensive cost, just far outside our reach. But there's no like marketplace where you could just click connect for them. That's correct. I'm not understanding what webhooks are. So sorry if I didn't make that clear. So webhooks are when a specific event happens in a system, you can hook onto that data and send it somewhere to alert. So in this case that I presented, it is sending it to the URL to the Power Automate flow to start my flow. And it has all that information that came from that event. How do you check for duplicates after the fact if it creates a new constituent? That's a great question. And the answer for me is this has saved me so much time that I'm better able to stay on top of duplicate constituent management and checking those things. But there are also, you could build automations to help identify those for you. Again, I saw Austin is on here. I'm sure she could she could provide examples of automations that they've built to streamline duplicate cleanup. But I just have more time now to keep up with the duplicate constituent management in NXT. Have webhooks been developed for education management yet? And that looks like that's probably a question for Blackbaud. So hopefully someone will be able to get back to you on that, but I am not sure. Is it possible to use Power Automate to run an automatic export instead of using Q? I would say it depends on the system. With Zoom, I'm not the person who has even access to our Zoom account or the back end, but our events team who does told me there was no way to schedule any sort of export from the registration. I don't know if that's true, but I asked them to look into it because I wanted to streamline that process, and for Zoom it was not possible. For Cvent it is, I know. I originally started with that before I built the custom connector, just to try to save myself time. So it depends on which system that you're using. And I think I got everything in the Q&A. Oh, maybe we've got a couple more. What learning resources did you use to get started with Power Automate? So definitely the Power Platform community through Blackbaud. And there's also a great monthly call for Power Automate user group. I started by just kind of attending those and watching people present their flows and also bringing problems with their flows to the calls. And seeing the answers from the experts of, oh, you could use this type of formula or this condition. And that really kind of helped get my wheels turning of, okay, here's their flow and here's these formulas they've used. I could apply this to my scenario. Also just downloading some of the templates from the template showcase in the community. Even if it's not one that you'd use, just going through and clicking the different steps and seeing what's configured helps you understand how to build and what types of conditions and formulas you might be able to use in your own situation. And people in the community are so helpful. If you're just getting started and you've done even something very bare bones and you're like, this isn't working, if you make a post in the community, usually someone's going to answer and give you some help with some real great specifics. So I would definitely recommend the community if you are not already a part of that. Did you ever run into hurdles with security in your journey implementing using Power Automate? Making sure the data is working is secure, getting approvals from IT, etc. I did not have any issues with getting approval and concerns with security, and I believe because we are such a Microsoft organization. We use Microsoft for everything, and our IT team has such a handle on the security with Microsoft, so I did not run into any issues with that. And I think if you are a Microsoft organization, you'll run into less hurdles than maybe if you were not. General question, for Power Automate flows, do the output fields need to be the same as the input? What I mean is if the flow is based on a field like gift ID to create a notification email, does the output field to show in the email have to be the gift ID? No, it does not have to be the same output. So the connectors have all sorts of different objects within them, and you're able to select which of them within the particular thing that you're accessing you want to be in the output, if that makes sense. I think I've got everything Q&A. I'm just checking to make sure I didn't miss anything. And I'll also quickly check the messages to see if there's anything there that didn't make its way over. Let's see. Okay. Well, I think I got everything. I'm going to stay on in case anybody has any questions that they're currently trying to think through and are typing out, and I'll hop back on camera and on the microphone if I see any more questions come through. But like I said, also feel free to email me, and I have my email there in the slides, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions or help you get started. Thank you. Looks like we got another question here. I took a few years off Blackbaud products and started an organization last year, and I'm trying to pick up NXT and Power Automate quickly. What resources do you recommend or classes for Power Automate? Let me drop the link for the Power Platform community in the chat. I would definitely at least for me, I think it probably depends on your learning type, but for me, the most helpful thing for learning has been the community, to both look at the templates and to join the community calls to bring your questions to. Drop that here. There's also a ton of resources available on Blackbaud. I need to find the actual link, but there's previous trainings and recordings that I've been able to view from the past. So let me see if I can find that, and if so, I'll drop that in the chat. So I'm dropping the link to the Blackbaud Sky Developer YouTube. I have watched a lot of trainings and examples on there when I was getting started, so hopefully this will be helpful as well.